where questions from members are put directly to Premier. And then when that's finished, we'll continue with the regular question period from today's statement. So we're now at 11:25. We'll start the clock for half an hour. Mr. Premier, the first question this morning to you is from the opposition leader. Opposition leader, would you like to put your question?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, my question to the Premier evolves around the efficacy of the SafeKey. A number of people have said they have a SafeKey but have never been tested. And given the rise of some vaccinated people catching the virus, there's concern that the SafeKey issue needs to be addressed, given that the those who are vaccinated are not tested on a regular basis at all. And this Premier speak to concerns that these people have about the efficacy of the SafeKey, and the fact that a number of SafeKey codes have never been tested and may be silent paradigm.
Mr. Premier?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I appreciate the question from the Honorable Opposition Leader, and it's a question that has been posed a lot of times. And I think what's important, Mr. Speaker, is that we give context to the entire situation of which the country is facing. And I think that it's important to recognize that we have put a number of steps and measures in place, and it would be difficult when our testing capacity is stretched as it currently is to then think to say that we need to test additional test capacity. The questions of which he has asked on behalf of others have also been asked and discussed internally. But what we have to do is we have to balance all resources at play to what is going to what will amount to the best, I would say, avenue for the government to move forward. At this time, there is no intention or desire to introduce tests for vaccinated persons in possession of a SafeKey. We outlined what this matter was, what the SafeKey program was for, and understood. It is also important to recognize that, Mr. Speaker, nothing, save for a full body spacesuit, can prevent anyone from contracting any virus. That is just the nature of where viruses exist. What a vaccination does do is it trains your immune system. So if you are exposed to a small amount of virus, you can fight that off so you do not get to the point of being contagious. There would be some vaccinated persons who would be contagious, but that would then get to the place where the public health measures are in place. If persons are doing what they're supposed to do as far as wearing masks, not going out when they're feeling unwell, persons are checking those the precautions that can be taken. It has to be a balance, Mr. Speaker. We do not have unlimited resources. So it would be great if in this country we did have unlimited resources, but unfortunately we do not. And we have to understand that our public health measures have to be guided in the way where we can make the best impact and handle things the best possible light in light of constrained resources that we have.
Thank you. Your supplementary, Opposition Leader?
Yes. Can the Premier also speak to the use of SafeKeys for private family events, i.e. wakes, marriages, birthday parties, so that the community is clear as to numbers that they have to limit themselves to, and rather SafeKeys would be required.
Premier?
Yes. Can the Premier also speak to the use of SafeKeys for private family events, i.e. wakes, marriages, birthday parties, so that the community is clear as to numbers that they have have to limit themselves to, and rather SafeKeys would be required.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, as I think was indicated by the Honorable Minister of Health when the announcements to public health regulations were made, I want to say on August 17th, was that going forward, that SafeKey was to be required for all large group exemptions. But I think that it's also important to note that with SafeKey can be used for private family functions, which are not large groups. The current large group limit is currently set at 50, as I indicated in my ministerial statement earlier. I was expected that the Minister of Health will announce revisions to that. But even if you had 10 persons who were gathering at your home and you wanted to make sure that you were being safe, you can ask for SafeKey. And every single person can verify and check the status of the SafeKey. It is at verify.gov.bm. Persons can go to gov.bm /SafeKey to find out more information on that. And I think that it's important to understand and recognize that this is a tool that can be used for everyone. One thing that I will say, Mr. Speaker, and it is very important because there's a number of persons who are confused when it comes in regards to SafeKey for contact tracing purposes. Just like we have, SafeKey is completely anonymous. So there is no government server checking and recording where persons are and where people are checking in. That is not how it is developed. The app reads the QR code and says whether that QR code is valid or invalid. That is all it does. Persons are not required to log in, provide any information for the use of it. It is something that is there. It is something that is open. And there are persons who are building apps on this to assist businesses.
Second supplementary?
Supplementary, Mr. Speaker?
No, the only person asking the question is able to have the supplementary.
No, thank you.
So, Officer Leader, do you have a second supplementary?
Not on that topic, no.
Would you like to go to your second question?
My second question is, with the current spike, can the Premier provide details on the resources that he's making available for the ICU and provide some comfort to this country that the government is providing required resources so that our hospital is not overstretched because of the spike? And can he share with the community what resources made available to the hospital?
I thank the Honorable Officer Shalita for his question. There has been no change insofar as the resources which have been provided to the hospital, and all those matters would have been detailed from the ramp up that we did last year to prepare for the worst possible case scenario, Mr. Speaker. So we do have ICU capacity, which was expanded, flex ICU capacity that was expanded, additional oxygen that was procured, additional ventilators that were procured with the help of donations. So the hospital is well prepared. The challenge, of course, which we'll have is human resources. That is a challenge which we're seeing throughout the world. That's a challenge which we're seeing throughout all of our healthcare systems. And you would have heard in my ministerial statement earlier that I've asked persons that they must be patient because there is stress and there is strain, and persons need rest. And the challenge, of course, which you'll have with persons who, because vaccinations have not been required in Bermuda, there are certain persons who are in the hospital and they have to manage those resources accordingly. But what I'd like to say is that I think that the hospital is doing a fantastic job. That they've been very transparent, but I think that also this week they have clearly set out in a number of interviews their financial position and the fact that they are challenged caring for the coronavirus. And the one thing I can say is that vaccinations are far less expensive to healthcare systems than treating COVID patients. And if we're concerned about the impact of the overall spending on coronavirus, what it has, we can recognize and understand that the more COVID patients are in hospital, the more that will, cost the overall healthcare system, the hospital, and the challenges in which they'll have for all of us who have to pay health insurance for the hospital through the Health Insurance Act, which the Honorable Minister of Health just spoke to.
Thank you. Supplementary?
No,
Officer Leader?
No, I have no supplementary.
Okay, would you like to put your third question?
My third question is this. The Premier said in the previous statement that going forward, the community will have to live with this virus like we live with the flu and other viruses. And it would be a way of life. Does the Ministry of Health have, or are they crafting permanent guardrails that will help the community and support the community in adopting the protocols with the COVID if we are going to state that it's going to be a way of life. So what type of support and what type of work has been done if we are going to take this permanent posture?
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I thank the opposition leader for his question. I think that it's important for us to recognize the basis of all public health interventions were to prevent the healthcare system from becoming overwhelmed. And it is important to note that there are certain sections of our healthcare system which currently right now are overwhelmed. Those would certainly be insofar as the testing system with a rush of people getting tested. And the hospital, of course, is experiencing a surge. The hospital does have excess capacity in which to handle COVID patients that are having to go back to their COVID plans. But that is the basis of our public health measures inside of a pandemic. The fact is, Mr. Speaker, if more persons get vaccinated, and thankfully the majority of persons who are seriously affected by the coronavirus are senior citizens, and over 80% of that population in this country has been vaccinated. I think the numbers might be closer to 85%. That is helps to relieve pressure on our healthcare system. But the most important thing that which we have to understand is, Mr. Speaker, is that yes, we are going to have to live with the coronavirus just as we live with other viruses. And there are many countries around the world who had zero tolerance approaches, who changed their zero tolerance approach because they recognized that it could not be sustainable in the face of increasing deadly variants. What is important is to answer a point inside of the question, which the opposition leader asked. Yes, the Ministry of Health is putting out guardrails, but it is clear, Mr. Speaker, we all know what we have to do. It is about wearing masks, keeping social distance, a proper hand hygiene, and staying home if you're unwell. Those are the basics. And once those basics are followed, then the country is in a good stead, and that reduces transmission. It is the basics that work for all variants. It is the basics that work for all respiratory illnesses that can be transmitted through droplets or through the air. And so from that perspective, Mr. Speaker, the guardrails are there. We understand what must take place, but what's most vital is people take the actions and steps to protect themselves. When I gave a speech, a national address in April, I said that persons can do their part by getting vaccinated, and if you choose not to get vaccinated, you can do your part by making sure that you observe public health measures. We do have a spike, Mr. Speaker. Our healthcare systems are strained, Mr. Speaker. It is vital that each and every single one of us and all leaders reinforce the position to those persons with whom we serve to say that it's time to make sure that we adjust our behaviors to make sure that we bring an end to this surge. But the fact is, Mr. Speaker, the coronavirus will be with us, and it is vital that we understand how to live and to cope. It cannot be blanket restrictions every single time that, in my opinion, Mr. Speaker, punish the vast majority of persons who are doing the right thing. That is the reason why we've spoken to the matter for the need for enhanced enforcement. Those matters are continuing, and as I indicated in my statement earlier today, there's a meeting later today which we expect will result in robust enforcement activity this weekend. And all businesses are on notice that we must adopt the zero tolerance approach because it is part of not following what has been laid out that has gotten us
here. Do you have a supplementary, opposition leader?
No, Mr. Speaker, I'm done. Thank you.
Okay, opposition leader, you've asked your 3 questions. The next member who's indicated to have a question for you, Premier, is MP Chair. MP Chair, would you like to put your question?
Good morning, Speaker and colleagues. Thank you for that. My video should be coming up shortly.
Okay.
Yes, Premier, change in direction. With our peak tourism season coming to a close, would you say that Bermuda has had a successful tourism season?
Speaker, my answer?
Yeah.
Sorry. Mr. Speaker, I thank the honorable member for his question. And I would say that certainly we have had a better tourism season than some would have expected last year. Certainly, given the current circumstances where our top feeder market, the United States, is struggling to get the coronavirus under control, and the fact that we certainly seen some of the challenges and some of the pushback on our protocols which we put in place for visitors. I would say that what we've done is remarkable. We've seen new hotels open. Some hotels have seen numbers that are nearing 2019 numbers. This, of course, will be impacted by the closure of Fairmont Southampton, but it's also a benefit for or not benefit, but it's showing that the existing hotels the other hotels are able to hold their own. In addition to that, the fact that the Ministry of Transport has been able to work to have cruise ships homeboarding here has certainly been a success, and also cruise visitors, fully vaccinated cruises resuming. I think there's been some that have arrived on island this week. And certainly when it goes to going forward regarding airlift, there's positive news, Mr. Speaker. American Airlines have just announced they'll be starting their daily service from Philadelphia on November 18th, which is something that I know that a lot of persons were looking for, and certainly continuing their daily service throughout the winter, and weekly Miami service will return on November 20th. We certainly have good news from Canada, and certainly with their high vaccination rates, that is something that will certainly be welcome. And we are continuing to make sure that we enhance our tourism service from the United Kingdom for fully vaccinated travelers. So, Mr. Speaker, I would say that it has been a success. And I want to say hats off to all the tourism workers, but not just the tourism workers, all the workers inside of the Ministry of Health who support tourism, the persons who process the travel authorizations, do the tests, and make sure that we can keep persons employed in tourism, which is vital for this country's survival.
Thank you. Supplementary?
No follow-up, Mr. Speaker. Thank you.
Mr. Speaker.
Next person. Hello?
Yes, Mr. Speaker. I was just wondering if you have me in your queue.
No supplementaries. The only person that has supplementary, that person get the question.
No, Mr. Speaker. I'm just making sure you have me in line to ask a question.
I have a list of all members that are provided by the whips from either party. If you're on the whips list, you're on my list. Okay? If you're not on the whips list, you're not on my list. All right? The next person who's down for asking questions, next member, is MP Dunkley. MP Dunkley, would you like to put your question to the Premier?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and good morning to colleagues. Honorable Premier, a question that has been asked to me numerous times over the past couple of days is, as we've seen the fourth spike shortly after Cup match, and UFC's doing regular updates, press conferences, will you consider having more regular updates and press conferences and not just releasing figures at night when most people have turned down?
Amen.
Mr. Speaker, I thank the Honourable for his question. I think the Minister of Health provided a very comprehensive update last week, Wednesday, and I know the Ministry of Health is committed to continuing to keep the public informed through technical updates and other matters. So I think that is important, but I think what's also important is that the country, as we position ourselves to live with the coronavirus and move beyond the pandemic, that we have to focus on the other matters of government, and that's where I'm trying to turn and to focus my attention. We have an economic recovery plan that we have to implement. There are things that we must make sure that we execute for the well-being of this country, and I have every confidence that the Minister of Health, the teams of the technical teams at the Ministry of Health can relay the information and relay the policy which is necessary to keep the public informed.
Supplementary?
Second question, Mr. Speaker.
You only get one question.
Supplementary question.
You have one question. When a member asks a question, they have a single question and two supplementaries. So if you like to exercise the supplementary, if you have no more supplementaries, then we'll move on.
Supplementary, Mr. Speaker. I thank the
Supplementary.
for taking this into consideration. In the Premier's statement, the Premier said something along the lines, as long as we're able to properly manage the care for those who need medical attention generally and those persons with COVID-19, we have no need to revert to lockdowns and curfew. Earlier in the statement, the Honorable Premier said that there were now more than 20 residents in hospital. That's up double since the earlier release this week. And information coming to me says that the hospital has been very busy. To the Honorable Premier, how close is the hospital to a position where we might have to consider lockdowns and curfews? In other words, how much capacity is left in the hospital in light of the drastic increase just over the last week?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the question of how close the hospital does have excess capacity, and the hospital does also have, Bermuda Hospital's Board does also have additional capacity at the custom-built landfill clinic in St. David's as well. So the Bermuda Hospital's Board, we ran through our pandemic preparedness. We have to recognize and understand that at the beginning of this pandemic, when it was not understand how widespread asymptomatic transmission of this virus was, we were planning for the hospitalization of 100 persons. So it's key to recognize and understand where we are. Where the hospital will indicate to us when they are stressed and strained. I think what's most important, MP Dunkley, to understand, and I think what's most important for the public to understand, that the hospitalizations which we're seeing now are not due to actions which took place today. They're due to actions which may have taken place 2 or 3 weeks ago. So a lockdown today is not going to stop the increase of hospitalization. So a curfew today is not going to stop the increase of hospitalization. It's not going to stop those various things of stress. What is going to stop that stress is for all of us to adopt the public health measures, make sure that we are doing what is necessary to stop the transmission of this virus and ensure that more persons get vaccinated. And as time goes, that stress and pressure be released. It's telling to see, Mr. Speaker, however, and this is very unfortunate, because we are suffering from a pandemic of the unvaccinated. That outlet is my understanding that there is only one person that is in the hospital who has been fully vaccinated. All the rest are unvaccinated, and that is what we see across the world. This is preventable. These things do not need to happen, and I would strongly encourage individuals and persons who speak to their doctor and get protected. This is the Delta variant today, and maybe something else in the future, and it is vital that we are doing that type of work. So I understand the perspective where the honorable members asked the question. These are the discussions that we're having internally, Mr. Speaker, but it's important that as we, as a country, must recognize and understand that the best way to make sure that we can continue to live with the coronavirus, which is a necessity, which is just a reality of life, is number one, speaking to our friends and families and our doctors to make sure that more persons protect themselves against hospitalization. And number two, observing the public health measures which are there to keep us safe. If we do those things, the country will be okay.
Second supplementary?
Yes, Mr. Speaker. Honorable Premier is preaching to the converted on that point, and I fully support that. But the situation is changing quickly. Can the Honorable Premier, second supplementary, inform the Honorable House, has the hospital recommended curfews or lockdown at this point?
It is not for the hospital to recommend public health policy. That comes from the Ministry of Health.
Okay. Thank you. The next member who has indicated a question for the Premier is MP Adams. MP Adams, would you like to put your question at this point?
Morning, Mr. Speaker.
Good morning.
Just adjusting my camera here. Mr. Speaker, just to piggyback on the opposition leader's question, in recognition of the wider use of SafeKey and the continued rise of cases, would the Honorable Premier share with this Honorable House any additional steps that businesses can take to protect their establishments?
Mr. Speaker, may I answer?
Yes, go right ahead, Premier.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I thank the honorable member for his question, and I think one of the most important things that must be recognized is that it's essential that businesses do whatever they can to protect their business, and I think the best thing to do is to ensure that they are using SafeKey properly. Unfortunately, what we see in our businesses that are just looking at QR codes, checking expiration dates, and admitting persons, and that is not the way that SafeKey was designed. SafeKey, like we'll become more and more accustomed to with the expansion of cryptocurrency and other types of things, uses a QR code. And a QR code is a secure code that can be scanned by a mobile device. And it's vital that businesses ensure that they check that their patron SafeKeys are valid by scanning it using verify.gov.vn. By scanning them using verify.gov.vn, which can be accessed on any mobile phone or any tablet. And what's also vital is they must check the patron's ID to ensure that the SafeKey is being used by the appropriate person. The last thing that a business wants is someone who might borrow a SafeKey from someone or ask their friends to send them a SafeKey, or someone one of their friends will be vaccinated, they may not be, and they have been tested, and to go into an establishment, especially in the time when we have community transmission. So it is vital that the SafeKey is scanned on verify.gov.vn, and it is confirmed, valid, and the ID is checked. And the other thing that businesses can do is just make sure that you are going back to basics. Ensure that staff wear masks, ensure that patrons wear masks when they are required to do so, ensure that you have hand sanitizer in place at the door, and ensure that if people are unwell, that you are not admitting them to your establishment. They're small, there is the view that business may say, oh, well, that's money I'm turning away. The last thing we want is for your entire business to be closed for 14 days. And that is what we're seeing happening across the country. So this goes back to personal responsibility and business responsibility. Businesses may want to go further than what the government has stated and mandated. Other businesses may want to implement those certain things. The government has given persons a tool in order to keep themselves safe and to understand how they can have safe interactions. And I encourage the country and businesses to go ahead and do whatever they feel is necessary to keep their businesses safe.
Thank you. Would you like a supplementary?
No supplementary. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Premier, the next member who has a question for you is MP Jackson. MP Jackson, would you like to put your question?
Yes, good morning, Mr. Speaker, and good morning, Premier. My question is around technology. I'm just wondering if the Premier would provide his position on advancements and improvements that can be made to improve the service of the hotline, the travel authorization app, the long lines at the Parrot Traveler COVID testing site, etc. And I must thank all of the human capital that is providing support. My curiosity is what is being done to advance and improve the technology or the processes to make these more consumer friendly and efficient.
Thank you. Premier?
I thank the honourable member for her question, Mr. Speaker. I just want to touch on the various items of which she had said, because I think she said travel authorization, testing, and there may be one other point which I may not have written down. Insofar as what's taking place on the travel authorization side, Mr. Speaker, there certainly have been increases and improvements to the technology there. One of the most important improvements is what was causing a challenge for the line is when incomplete applications were submitted, person needed to call to correct and to update that. But over a month ago, I do believe that an update was rolled out that if incomplete information was submitted, individuals did not have to call the hotline, and they could go ahead and just click the link and update their information and go ahead and submit that information there. So I know that is one technology upgrade that has been made, and I know the teams are consistently working on trying to make the process certainly more efficient. What I would say also is that I know that you would recognize we've rolled out 1-800 numbers to make sure that our visitors, our toll-free numbers that our visitors are able to access, or persons calling from overseas who are having difficulty there. I think there needs to certainly be more education. And being someone who traveled recently to the United States, I understand how difficult it is to get a test in the United States before you return back to the country, and that is something that causes a lot of stress. So we're going to make sure that we provide additional reminder of education on how persons can access these services online in the U.S. We're speaking about making more efficient insofar as testing here in Bermuda. Mr. Speaker, I'm just going to be a little bit more blunt than I normally are. In Bermuda, we are incredibly spoiled. And I say that because we have had an outstanding response to the coronavirus. In other countries, people have to drive miles to get tested. Many hours of waiting extremely long lines. The system at Perot, though sometimes lines get long, is an incredibly efficient testing system. They have things that are pre-printed. They have times where appointments are given. Persons can go through there. The lines are long, but the lines are efficient. And the challenge of which I have to say, Mr. Speaker, is that we are doing more. We have extended to visitors in large hotels, where we're allowing persons to be tested at hotels. But some of those resources may have to be poured for schools. And as we're seeing our tourism season, past the peak, there will be the redeployment of resources to focus on places where they are. But what I would say is I think that just like the honorable member paid homage to the teams that are doing the work, I think that they are doing an incredible amount of work. And though the lines sometimes can get long, I think that we should recognize that what we have here is still universally praised by visitors because they have been to other places in other jurisdictions and recognize that the weights that we have here are nothing compared to the weights that people have in other places accessing those services. So I think we should not just compare it to the view of which we have is that we want something right now, we shouldn't have to wait in line. We need to view it and compare it to the fact that what we are doing is an appropriate use of resources, and we're continuing the work to try to make it more and more efficient and make sure that we deploy the resources in the best way possible.
Thank you. Do you have supplementary question?
Yes, Mr. Speaker, I do.
You have supplementary?
Yes, I just wanted to focus in on the travel authorization form for a moment, as it causes so much angst for returning residents. And, I personally have seen people, tourists, visitors, wanting to get to the island and unable to board a flight because the travel authorization isn't exact. My question to the Premier is that if and when a person or family has submitted the travel authorization information, if there is any way that that technology can, and has paid the $75 per person, if there's any way that that technology can verify that a person is allowed to then get on the plane.
Member, let me pause you for a minute. I'm trusting you'll be able to hear the alarm going off beside me, indicating that the 30 minutes for the Premier's question has come to a close. So I ask that we end the Premier's question period at this time.